Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 3, I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling, and my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Today, I kind of have a Holy Spirit hangover from last night. And last night was a demonstration, I believe, of the power and the witness of the Holy Spirit, of His love and His joy. It wasn't because of great words of wisdom. It wasn't because of great speech. It was because of His presence and your openness to His presence. And this morning, it is my pleasure, it's my joy to welcome you all here to the annual winter conference, the 18th, I guess, annual winter conference. Come and see, go and tell. Months ago, when the staff came and said, what would you like to see the theme be as you pray over for the winter conference? It didn't take long. I said, come and see, go and tell. So we opened the doors last night, and a lot of fresh wind blow in. And I believe last night in our worship experience, I believe that's who we are. I believe that's what we're about. That's what we lead with, is pointing people to Jesus, opening to the Holy Spirit, to glorify the Father in worship and praise and word and spontaneity. Within the structure of a liturgical type service, being able to kind of push on the boundaries at times and having that structure and appreciating the structure, but also appreciating all the life that's within it. As I welcome you this morning, I also welcome our speakers, the two main plenary speakers, David Fitch and Cherith Feed Nordling, and you'll hear from them later today and tomorrow. But the joy of what I get to do to you this morning, with you this morning, is to give testimony. To give testimony about what God has done, not just this past year, but go all the way back to the beginning. And it's something important that we do at every winter conference is to remind who are we and what are we about. We are a missionary society, formed about 18 years ago with all kinds of things leading up to that time. And you know the story as it's gone throughout that time. And we've had a recent, obviously, event with the death of Chuck Murphy, the founding primatial vicar, apostolic vicar, lead bishop, whatever you want to call him, but really the founding of the Anglican mission in America that set a tone that would change Anglicanism in North America for generations to come. It simply will. I want to give note about some of that because in 2014 I stood before you for my first address in the role that I'm in now, and when I did that, before I did that, I went back through all of his talks. And I wanted to see kind of what were some of those common themes that Chuck kept pointing about. Because Chuck, in many things that he is, probably the main thing he is a visionary. He's the kind of guy that can see over the road, behind the building, over the mountain. And he just had that ability. That was a God-given ability to see those kinds of things. So I wanted to make sure that I was swimming in those same kind of waters of that vision and carry on that vision that he had. And it was always a vision about being a missionary society. It was always a vision about Celtic type of Christianity. It was always a vision about something that was lightweight, low maintenance, and just go. St. Patrick was one of his heroes, of course, and we know how he did things. And so we're modeled a lot off of that kind of Celtic Christianity. Life on life, living life, where bishops aren't sitting up in a CEO office somewhere making commands, but rather with the people, being senior pastors of churches, all the ways that the structures that he did over that period of time. And so going back over all those talks, I got to kind of swim in those same waters and loved it and give witness and testimony to you over throughout the years about the kinds of things that have been taking place. A few weeks ago, I was asked by the Murphy family to take the funeral service, the memorial service for Chuck Murphy. And it was a daunting task in lots of ways, but it was a joy in lots of other ways. People often ask me, do you do a good funeral sermon? I say, well, it depends on the material I have to work with. And with Chuck, I mean, where do you start and where do you stop? I mean, it's just so much that was there. Visiting with Margaret and the three girls and the two son-in-laws several days before that, and Stu Bamig, who's now the rector of the Abbey, and just having a chance to visit with them and talk and share. It was a great honor and a great privilege to preach at his service in the Abbey Church in Pawleys Island. And there were three things I talked about. I'm not going to go through the whole sermon or anything, but the three things I talked about because I think they're important. The legacy of, first of all, the legacy of family. That's really where it all begins. When people look at our lives, what do they see in our family life? It doesn't mean everything's perfect. It just means where are our intentions? Where is our first love? And the legacy of family. And the strength of his family. And one of the things they kept saying to me was, Philip, people probably don't know how much fun Dad was. He just had so much fun. In fact, one of them gave a story that I've repeated several times because it's so good that a priest, several decades ago in Alabama, where he came from, said if you opened up Chuck's brain, you would find about 75% scripture and 25% mischief. One of the son-in-law says, I don't think those percentages are right. But that gives you some of the character of what he was about, because he was a character in so many ways. So the legacy of family is the strength. Margaret and Chuck married 48 years, dated 2 years before that, so we'll just count it as 50. And it's devastating for her. It's devastating for the family right now. But the legacy of family is so strong. Then the legacy of leadership. That's why we're here. All the changes that you know about that's taken place in the Anglican world in North America are a result of, primarily, of Chuck's leadership. It simply wouldn't have happened without his leadership. The Lord really anointed him at a special time to be in that place. And there were lots of other great acts. There was Archbishop Colini, Archbishop Moses Tay, and later on Archbishop Young, and other people throughout the past 18 years who, with great courage, reached out and gave coverage to it. So there's that connection to the communion. But if Chuck hadn't been the man, it just wouldn't have taken place the way it has now. And we know the things that developed out of that is the creation of what's called ACNA, Anglican Church of North America. It's more like the Episcopal Church in its structure. All that, it wouldn't be there if AMA hadn't started. Chuck hadn't been that guy out of the box. He's always been that kind of guy that's just been the first one to take the hill and go up and get bloodied for it oftentimes. But he did it, and he led in such a powerful way. The legacy of leadership. And then the legacy of his character. St. Augustine says that, the Lord put salt on our lips to make us thirsty for him. I think the Lord puts salt on other people's lips in such a way that when you look at him, you're thirsty for the Lord, and you're thirsty for this vision the Lord's put on this other person's heart. That's what reminds me of Chuck. Just when he talked, there was such grace. There's that southern charm, there's a twinkle in his eye, but there's always something apostolic about it. Always something moving forward about it. And he did it with a whole lot of grace. I want to quote a little bit from this article in Christianity Today about Chuck. It just came out the other day, so just a few things. Chuck was an astonishingly eloquent speaker and expositor of the gospel, Fitzsimmons Allison says, a retired bishop in the Episcopal Church, but a great friend of the mission, who served as Murphy's bishop in South Carolina. He got many invitations to speak. He was billed as a person who helped raise money, but actually he was preaching the gospel, including generosity. He did it so well that there were clergy who disliked him and were jealous of his success. He could preach the horns off of a billy goat. John Schuler, who I think is here or will be here this week, says, he's the founder of NAMS, New Anglican Missionary Society. Chuck Murphy, very reluctantly, it must be said, took the chairmanship. Without his efforts, almost nothing most of the other leaders did would have been as effective in the subsequent years. Bishop Allison goes on to say, Chuck was not appreciated fully, and he would not defend himself when he was attacked personally, which was a personal virtue and an organizational fault. He would not build his case on the backs of other people. That's the kind of guy he was, always taking the high road. It hurt him. It hurt the mission. But that's his character. And finally, Bishop Allison again says, his legacy will be for a radical change in the way the church sees its mission. Bishops should be more like Celtic bishops in the 6th century. They were missionaries and converted people. Bishops shouldn't sit as a CEO of an organization. So see, that's what we carry with us. That's what we're about. Lightweight, low maintenance, point people to Jesus, bring people to Christ, grow them up. Disciple the found. Build leaders out of those who are discipled. And new apostolic works will bear fruit as they go forward. Come and see, go and tell. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, God, for Chuck. Thank you for his gifts. Thank you for his leadership. Thank you for his family. I can't close about Chuck without saying some of the Chuckisms. There are some Chuckisms that some of you will remember, but I mean, they're just so special. We just got to say them. The greatest one I've really probably about the Anglican mission and anything else is, it's all about mission, nothing more and nothing, nothing more and nothing less. And when you begin a project or begin some kind of apostolic work, you take a step and take a step. Sometimes when you gather together with people and there's some kind of issue, let's put all the skunks on the table. That's another one that's great. Put all those skunks on the table. He said about clergy, when clergy gather together, it's like manure. It kind of stinks. But if you spread them out, you get some beautiful roses. There's a time to gather together. We've done some of that this week, but now it's going to be spread out. And the one that's probably my favorite says, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I don't know where he got that one from, but I've never heard it from anybody else. But it kind of gives you a sense, let's just kind of cut through all the stuff and let's get to what the real issue is about. And there's many, many more, but those are some of them that I remember. Others may be able to share more later on. So thank you. Thank you, Lord. What are we about? What are we doing as an apostolic ministry, as apostolic work? We are a gospel-centered mission, leading people to Jesus, growing them up in Christ, recognizing, resourcing, and raising up leaders to start new works. That's what we're about. That's what we've always been about. In the beginning days, it was more like a refuge. A lot of churches would come into the AMIA because there really wasn't anywhere else to go, but over time, they wanted to form something that was more provincial, which is great, but that never was the vision of the mission. Let's stay lightweight. Let's stay low maintenance. Let's be that tip of the spear that where we can go and we can plant and start new works, and we don't have to ask permission. Grateful and thankful for our overseas partners. Grateful and thankful for those relationships, and we still continue with those today. There's about, 13 or 14 of them that from Myanmar and most of the rest of them in Africa, and there's others I'm sure they're kind of being worked on, and they're glad to partner with the mission. We're glad to partner with them, and oftentimes send teams of people over there, and they send people here as well, and so we're just grateful for that relationship, but they hold our licenses, and so we're grateful for that, and grateful for that connection to the Anglican communion, what all that's about. But lead people to Jesus. Grow them up in Christ. Maintain, find, and resource leadership. And start new works. We are a society of mission and apostolic works. I came across an article that someone sent me about characteristics of apostolic work. Characteristics of apostolic ministry. Another thing Chuck used to say, I need to mention this at this point. He would say that, everyone wants some kind of apostolic ministry, start things, but not everyone wants to put up with the apostolic experience. There's a difference. And that's why he said to me when I was first made bishop at the first council of bishops meeting I went to in 2008, he said, Philip, in this apostolic work we're doing, you need to carry a big comb in your pocket and comb out all the spitwads people are going to shoot at you during your time of being a bishop. And he's right. And they've been shot at me, and they still are. And he certainly received it more than most. But the point is, everybody wants the apostolic ministry in that role, but not everybody enjoys the apostolic experience. But here's some characteristics of apostolic work. Number one, apostolic leaders start new things. Pray for people. Look for people, both in your church and outside the church, that have that desire to start new things. Whether spiritual or not, apostolic leaders start new things. An ability to get things get them off the ground, even if they don't always last. It's a new initiative, a new gathering, a new community. They leave a trail of new communities. That's one characteristic of apostolic leadership. It doesn't mean it's done perfectly, but it means, what new things, as we pray and listen and collaborate, that God is calling us to do. And I get to hear these stories. You're going to hear some of them in a moment. Number two, apostolic characteristics, they demonstrate spiritual intensity. There's a zeal. And for young people, that zeal sometimes is misplaced or sometimes kind of goes out of, so mature people come alongside, but allow that. Allow there to be some risk. Allow there to be some messiness in that spiritual intensity. People zealous for God, His mission, and His people. Number three, apostolic leaders think structurally. Now, if you don't tend to think structurally, you find people that do if you're an apostolic leader, because I do not tend to think real structurally. But I find people that do, and I surround my people that do. I'm grateful for people that do. Evangelists and pastors tend to think about individuals or groups. Nothing wrong with that. Apostolic leaders think about systems and structures. They start new things. They're zealous. They're very intense about that. They think structurally, or they get people to think structurally with them. Number four, apostolic leaders express a burden for expansion. While some are concerned for what is already, the apostolic leaders express a burden for what is not yet. Really. Last night, before the service, we prayed, Lord, just surprise us. Just show up and surprise us. And so we open the doors and we do things because I keep thinking about the people out there. I don't want this to be just some kind of holiness club. This is something that we go out there and look out. And for people who aren't in the room, for communities who aren't being reached, for territory no one else is talking about. Who do you see? Who do you know in your sphere of influence that is consciously championing growth and expansion to new territories? That's what good apostolic leadership does. And number five, apostolic leaders respond to big challenges. The more impossible the dream, the more motivated they are to take it on. Sometimes you bite off more than you can chew. Almost every day I think I've bitten off more than we can chew. And then God shows up and God brings that leadership. It brings people alongside to help and encourage. But those are just some of the characters of, I think, of what it means to be apostolic characteristics. They start new things, spiritual zeal, they think structurally, they express a burden for what is not yet, and they respond to challenges. They're willing to bite off more than seem that they can chew. Not because we're wise, not because we have it all together, not because we have a 5-year strategic plan exactly how things are going to work out like in business. Sometimes people can do that. No, it's not about the wisdom, as I said, from Paul in 1 Corinthians. It's about the demonstration of His power and His Spirit. So even when things fail or things don't seem to be working out the right way, it's always falling and failing forward. That's the heart of an apostolic leader. Whether a lay person or ordained person or whatever they may be, look for those people. They may not be in the church. They may not even be Christian yet, so pray for them. But keep your eyes out for those kinds of people that can do those kinds of things and bring in that kind of ministry and that kind of love and that kind of awareness, willing to go anywhere. A joy that I get to do is to point to what is happening in the mission over this past year, because there's a lot that's gone on. And I want to share with you some of the initiatives that are taking place. And some of it gets to be resourced by what we call the Living the Mission Fund. The Living the Mission Fund is part of our budget. Also, we receive gifts from outside. It's that fund that kind of helps us to start new works or help works that are going on that are building the church in new ways. They make application. We look at it. We see, do we have the funds? Do we have the resources? As well as helping new church plants. What many of you don't know that we're so blessed with in the Anglican Mission is to have the resources to help assess people for church planting. It's not all about church planting. I know that. It's about starting new works and building new things and building our churches and all that. And it's about church planting. And so we're blessed to have Alan Hughes working with us in leadership development, working with us in helping consult, working with us in helping to assess people who sign up to say, I think I'm a church planter, I'm not sure, I'd like to be, but you know what goes on here, and he's got a great assessment tool and a process for all that. It's not perfect, but it's something that we, more than what we had before. In the good old days, someone said they were a church planter, we said, well, here's some money, go see what you can do with it. And so now we've learned a few lessons along the way, but those are some of the resources we have to offer people. The leadership development is something, I want to tell you, that is true on the church level. That's not just about clergy. It's about lay people as well. We've had Alan come to our church to do what's called the clarion call, what the clarion call, he will come to your church, he or someone he's trained, and take your leadership, whoever you want to bring to it, whoever you want to invite to it, to go through a process so they can understand God's calling on their life, their contribution, how God has wired them, the different stages of leadership development, looking at some material that Terry Walling has done and a guy named Robert Clinton. And it takes you through a timeline. You develop your own timeline and look to see where God has worked it. And people come out of that, and they're so encouraged. They're so strengthened. And Alan, you just do a great job with that. I want to thank you for that. I want to publicly thank you for that, because that is something I don't think anyone else is offering. Not just for clergy, it's for everybody. Yeah, give them a big hand. Thank you. And so the people that have done it in our church, they'll meet with Dave Larley or some other people afterwards and just kind of process it. And they may find a new avenue in what God is leading them, or find out some things about their past that were so painful, and now they're seeing how God is using that. Because everybody has some pain in their past. As I tell our church all the time, give up the hope of ever having a better past. You're just not going to have one. So there's always going to be some pain there. But God can use all that. And so calling, contribution, convergence. So I've understood that in the 50s and 60s, that's when things ought to really be converging with your gifts and how God has made you and how God has wired you, and that God gives you a certain platform in which to use these gifts. And I can see that working out in my life. And then you leave a legacy. And then that's how we can talk about Chuck Murphy. A legacy of family, legacy of leadership, a legacy of character, and your own legacy. But it's seeing how God is sovereignly working in your life. It's a great resource tool. Any church can use it. Just call him. And if he can't come, he'll find someone that can. You can also call him if you want consultation in your church about church growth or church structures and things of that nature, or programs, or just kind of where is your church and all those kinds of things, or what's going on that way. So I just want to point out those resources because they really are helpful. I get coaching. So good leaders will always try to improve in the leadership. Will always try to grow in the leadership. Chuck did. And it's something that's a legacy that we can carry on. How has God made me? How God has wired me? What opportunities has God given for me? How can I learn more about how I'm responding to God and who God is in my life? So this past year, I've had the opportunity out of the Living the Mission Fund, which I spoke of a moment ago. It's that fund that kind of helps start new initiatives, as well as counseling or working with churches going through transitions. So, for example, in the Abbey, in Pawleys Island, South Carolina, a church that Chuck started 4 or 5 years ago, and this past year, as he's been dealing with the cancer, and there was just a lot of question marks about what was going to be happening, and then we got near the end of the year, and he took a 3-month sabbatical. And so Stu Bamig, who is here, he was Chuck's assistant, been his assistant for 4 or 5 years, and very loyal to Chuck, very loyal to the Abbey, and then just the way the process has worked out, and I've helped be a part of that and just kind of listening and help guide and help pray through them. Now he's a new rector called to be the rector of the Abbey. And it all just kind of has worked out in a way that's not going to be easy to follow someone like Chuck. He casts a large shadow, but Stu has a shadow of his own. And so just pray for him and pray for them, and I think it's a tremendous opportunity. They had some great outreach events over the Christmas season that they just hadn't had in a long time because everybody's been focusing on would Chuck come back or not. Now that's over, and now they're moving to a new time. Caleb Miller and Emmanuel in Destin, Florida, and just working with him. He's called a new assistant for him as well, and he's made some changes to kind of bring that church that was kind of on the decline when he took it over, and now it's kind of building back up, and I'm so glad to encourage him and to work with him. Gray Eccles, a Prince of Peace in Vieira, Florida. I had a chance to go there in December and preach and talk to his leadership and answer any kind of questions and get to know Gray better as well. And I just offer that to any of the churches. I'm glad to come and put a face to what the mission is about. Come visit your churches, talk to your leadership, talk to you, preach, whatever you want me to do, and see those kinds of things. We've had, in the church planting realm, we've had these kinds of things we can point back to this past year. Chad Jarnigan, Luminous Church in Franklin, Tennessee. It's a church plant. Our Living the Mission Fund is helping support that and seeing a lot of good work, a lot of good fruit out of what's going on there. Jay Wright in our own backyard, who planted this church, All Saints East Dallas, is now called St. Bartholomew's. In the next several months, they're going to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining. And so in about, a 2.5, almost 3-year period, that's exactly been a timeline that we thought might work out. We've never done this before. I've never done it before, but Jay's never done it before, so we did it together. And Jay has done an incredible job. Jay, where are you? Are you here this morning? There he is back there. Jay, just fantastic, really. And Chris Myers, his assistant, we've been blessed to have the resources at All Saints to be able to support that so that you're not parachute dropping into a place and, hope that you can find somebody that will give you a job. And it's just worked out great. He's taken that and has done a tremendous job along with Chris. So it's good to see that kind of work going on. Down in San Antonio, Drew Witt is a church self-sustaining as well as he's moved on to with Grace Church Northridge and working with Matt. You all have heard of his story in the past. We've had 3 new priests that were ordained. They were deacons, now priests. Mark Walls. So as Jay went out to do his, a year or so after that, we brought in Mark Walls to come on staff. Mark will be planning a church somewhere in North Dallas, probably in 2019 at some point. And Mark Walls' father-in-law is Jeff Chapman, who's a priest in ACNA up in St. Stephen's and Swickley. And so he comes from good stock that way. Mark Walls is a great guy, and he was ordained a priest back in the fall along with Drew Witt, and Britt was also. Those 3 people were ordained priests back in the fall. So a lot of the growth that we're seeing there. It's not all about ordination, of course. Ordination doesn't mean there's growth. There's lots of people ordained who don't do anything. But these are people who have apostolic, who are reaching out, the kind of people that the mission is about. And so we're so grateful for all that. We have visitors here. I call them recruits, but people who they hear about the Anglican mission. And so we'll come to Winter Conference, kind of see what we're about. And they were here last night. And I told them, I said, well, that's really what we're about. We lead with worship. We just do. Now, there's other things that we do as well, of course, but discipleship making and training and all that kind of stuff. But worship kind of is our bread and butter. That's what we want to lead with. And so we're so grateful for those people that are here, and you'll see them around. And then we love connecting with other missionary-type organizations. Todd Atkinson with VIA, the VIA churches. Todd was here, of course, last year. And he and the Canadians come down south about this time every year. And we're glad to have Todd, you and your group with us. And they bring the flannel experience and everything. Todd is a great leader and a great speaker. And I encourage you to bring him to your church as well. And the people that he's brought down with him. I think you heard Rob Steele a couple of days ago, the clergy did for the clergy retreat. But so we like to partner with all that. Mike Murphy. Mike, where are you? Raise your hand, Mike. Mike Murphy, right here. Mike Murphy's been with the mission longer than the mission's even been in existence, I think. But Mike Murphy moved out to California. He and Sydney, his wife, they still have their home in El Dorado, Arkansas, but they built a house out in California, and he got connected with what's called the ECO Church. ECO is another Presbyterian group. If you think we have lots of acronyms, you ought to be Presbyterian. They got more acronyms than Carter has pills, but the one that he's been involved with is it's called ECO, E-C-O-P, Evangelical Covenant Order of Presbyterians. Did I say that right? All right, that's a mouthful. But anyway, typical Presbyterian. But these guys, they think they want to plant 3 stream churches. And so Mike got connected with him, and he's helped actually a church plant get going out in California. And he was just down in Houston meeting with the leadership of the national leadership of ECO. And so we can just work. We're willing and want to work with anybody, anywhere, anytime that we can. And that says something, I think, about what Chuck set in place, what God has ordained in the Anglican mission. Jamie George working up in Colorado. He's got a secular job, but on the side he's working hard. He and his wife working hard to plant things up there as well. And then we have opportunities for training of people who think they're called to church planting. There's 2 things happening, I think, in the church world in the United States today. Number one is church planting has gotten to be kind of sexy, right? And because when I went to seminary in the 80s, they never talked about it. Now, that was in a denomination that just didn't do it. But so I'm sure there were other people doing it, but I just had never heard it. And more you kind of hear about it because people say that church planting is the easiest way you're going to connect with people who are non-church. And if there are 100 million, totally non-church people, then it behooves us to find people and raise up leaders to start more new kinds of works and more opportunities so people can get on board. I think one of the reasons for the growth in All Saints with the young people is because they can find a place pretty easily. They didn't have to wait for a long time to be in leadership. They didn't have to wait for a long time to get involved in the life of the church. And the pastor knew their name and took them out and met with them and prayed with them, all those kinds of things. Well, we just need, 1 million communities like that. If there's 100 million really hardcore unchurched people, that means and about 3/4 of them, Barna says, will come to something that's going to be like a new work at 75 million, then we got a lot of work to do. But we started up in 2000 with that. That was the initial vision. Go back to America, Chuck. Reach the 130 million unchurched Americans in North America. That's what the vision was. That's what we kind of held on to. And we still have plenty of opportunities to do the same. So those are just some of the opportunities and some of the ways that we can point to what God is doing. We have chaplaincy program. We talked about that last night. Jay Clark today being elevated to chaplain lieutenant in the United States Air Force. We have other chaplains we're going to honor here later on, I think around 1 or 1:30, something like that. So just to look back, those are some of the real positive characteristics, positive attributes of what God has done over this past year that's a joy for me to point to. It's a joy for me to visit your churches. It's a joy for me to visit and talk and share with you, while at the same time at All Saints Dallas we're doing our own thing, and so it's just but the Lord has put a great team around me. In the office, of course, Caroline Norris. Many of you know Caroline, and she's kind of the Susan Grayson, if you remember Susan from the past. Where are you, Caroline? You're here somewhere. You got to be. Raise your hand. I don't see. There you are. She's back there. Give Caroline a big hand. Thank you for all that you do. And then Mike Blanchett is the Director General, or kind of the COO, if you want to put it that way, Executive Director of the mission. Just does an incredible job. He's a great guy to bounce things off of. And where's Mike Blanchett? Thank you, Mike. Raise your hand. Thank you. Well done. Well done. Kevin Donnan serving his role of ecclesiastical affairs for many, many years in the mission. It's been so great in helping get these partnership relationships going and working on the international aspects of it. Last night, we made Ryan Owsley a canon. His is more of the domestic part here for the Anglican Mission. Kevin's is more for the college and the international piece. There'll be some crossover. But Kevin, are you here somewhere? Raise your hand, Kevin. Back there. Thank you, Kevin. Give Kevin a big hand. So those are just some of the people that I get to work with and enjoy doing ministry with, as well as the staff at All Saints and as well as all of y'all. In this past year, one other thing, in this past year, some of you may have heard about this new chapter in the Anglican Mission called the Anglican Mission International, AMI. I just heard about it in late August. First I'd heard about it, but apparently it had been kind of in the works before that. Not great communication with me about all that, but nevertheless, its focus is more on the international piece, like in Haiti and the Caribbean, and I think Southern Europe or West Africa or something like that. And really, this is people that have a real focus on the international work. And so as I found out more about it and talked to people about it, I had two good conversations with Bishop Carl Buffeting and Bishop Jerry Schnackenberg, and who were very instrumental in getting this thing up and going, along with, I'm sure, Archbishop Quillini and others I don't know about. But nevertheless, I said, it seems to me, it makes sense to me that you would be a bishop in the AMI rather than the AMIA, because it really seemed to be kind of a focus. And they said, yeah, that does make sense. And so now there are bishops in the AMI, and some of the churches are transferred into AMI, so we want to bless that and lift it up and say, go forward. And it kind of brings clarity to what we're about. Yes, we're involved with international work as well, but our primary focus is doing what I said from the very beginning, leading people to Jesus, building up our own churches, planting and doing new works here in America. This is the hard work. It is not easy doing apostolic work or planting churches, particularly three-stream type of churches that focus on Scripture, sacrament, and Spirit here in the United States, in the kind of culture we're in right now. And because we're in a post-Christian culture. And being in a post-Christian culture, it's just, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of sweat, there's a lot of failures along the way as well. but that's what we feel like we're called to do. And so having the AMI set up to what kind of they do, another chapter. So there's a variety of chapters in the Anglican Commission. There's an Anglican Commission in America. There's an Anglican Commission in Canada. Silas, are you here somewhere? I don't know if Silas is here. He was here earlier. Anyway, and then the Anglican Commission in India, and now the Anglican Commission International. These are all different chapters. They do different things. And but we're holding that rope tight to what we do. We're holding that rope tight to doing the hard work of building up our churches, starting new works, planting churches here in America. A rising tide lifts all boats because we operate out of the 10-10-10 principle, right? We ask a congregation, biblically speaking, 10% to the church 10% to the mission 10% to our overseas partners. And that's been in place since the beginning of the mission, I guess, but back before I even came on. So that's another development over this past year that I think brings a lot of clarity to what we're about, and a lot of clarity for other people to what they may want to be about as well. So those are all the things. And I'm sure I left some things out, but in talking about the different things happening in churches around the mission, the final thing I want to talk about, and this is pretty exciting too, there's 3 different opportunities for potential church planners to be trained and lifted up. One of them is in San Antonio with their internship program. Robert Balfour is down there right now doing that with Matt and his group down in San Antonio. Another one is in Dallas that we have our own internship program with Mark Walls and kind of learning as we go through all that and getting ready for what he'll be doing. And then Little Rock has started one this past year. It actually starts in September. And John Schuler is working with David Young and some of the leaders at St. Andrew's Church in Little Rock, Robert Cook. And so you can talk to him about that program. It's kind of a residential program where people come once, I don't know how often, maybe they come a week every 3 or 4 months and come and visit and then do some other assignments on the outside. And it's about a 9-month program. But all these are initiatives trying to help understand what we do. And I already gave recognition to Alan of what he does. If you sign up on our website, I think I want to be a church planter, this whole form that you go through and the whole process you go through, and it's interactive and it's connected and it's relational, and it talks to your families, talk to your wife, and it's so comprehensive and so thorough, so much more than what we had 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. It's so exciting to see all these kind of opportunities. So the Anglican Commission has our own. This deal in Little Rock is something that St. Andrews is doing. The deal in San Antonio is something that anybody can go to as well, and all of the opportunities to grow. So last night, I talked about, in John chapter 1, the unnamed disciple. Let's keep in mind what our goal is about. That unnamed disciple was with Andrew. Andrew went and told Peter and said, Peter, come and see. And then Jesus met with Philip, and Philip goes to Nathanael and says, hey, you need to come and see. Who is that unnamed disciple? That unnamed disciple is out there. That unnamed disciple may have visited your church. What are you and I doing to make these people feel welcome? What are we doing to create that culture of invitation that Alpha does such a great job with? If you're interested in Alpha and know more about Alpha and how to put on a great Alpha program, talk to Dave Larley. He's the one that's been doing our program. He's done 42 Alphas. Not all in Dallas, but all the ones we've done in Dallas, but before he was in Dallas, he's done those as well. And it creates that culture of invitation, of listening and learning and loving and laughing a lot. But that unnamed disciple, that's who we're going for. So I talked to Tom Kingman before the service. Tom Kingman's a neurosurgeon, right? And so he's dialing down his business some so he can go to San Angelo and work 10 days a week there and 20 weeks off. But some of the off time is going to be working this is what he said, I want to work as a bartender for a while in a bar because that's where all the people meet and that's where the people are. Now, that's apostolic. That's reaching out. And so that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of initiatives that we can have. We have an All Saints Christmas party every year. And we had one this past year at the Flight Museum in Dallas. Over 800 people showed up. We had a band, we had food and drinks, and we had a dance floor. And we had a little presentation about halfway through it about Alpha. But the main thing was to come and people have fun so they know they could have a good experience. And then when they're invited to a church, it's going to be okay. But they're also going to learn about this man, Jesus. And they're going to hear about this man, Jesus. And they're going to hear about the hope that the Holy Spirit can give us to glorify the Father. And so they can look at Jesus and say, this is what it really means to be human. That's where the unnamed disciple wants to go. That's where you and I need to continue to have our eyes out for apostolic leadership to raise up so that we can find ourselves, and along with through other people as well, these unnamed disciples and bring them to Christ. Amen? Father God, thank you for this time this morning. Thank you, Lord, for your word. Thank you for your spirit that encourages us. Thank you how we encourage each other. May your spirit continue to be present this morning and throughout this day and tonight at the healing service as we move forward in hope, looking for the unnamed disciple, looking for apostolic leaders, bringing people to Jesus, raising up leaders, starting new works in gospel communities together. In Christ's name, amen.